Welcome to the Camp Constitution annual barbecue and book sale. I'm your host, Colby Mazzarella, and our guest today is famous conservative author James Perloff. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks very much, Colby. Certainly good to see you again.
Well, I see that you've brought 3 books that you've authored, and what's this 4th DVD?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mentioned that first. I have a music DVD. You know that I was a hippie about 40 years ago.
I've heard that.
You know, one thing about us hippies, we always had music about all the issues we cared about, all the social and political issues. I noticed conservatives never had that. They had traditional patriotic songs, but nothing about the issues. So this is a music CD we made in a Christian music studio in Boston with 7 different lead vocalists. And it's got a tribute to Vietnam vets. We actually recruited anti-communist Vietnamese from the local area to play the part of the Viet Cong on this song.
Oh, so did you act it out, or they sang
Oh,
in
they
a chorus?
no, they're not singing. They're playing the role. We have a battle scene. We recreated battle scene, and we've got a tribute to homeschoolers with homeschool kids singing the chorus. Song about religious freedom. Song about the New World Order. It's 12 politically incorrect songs for the rest of us to have something to enjoy.
So it was kind of a cast of thousands almost.
It was a cast of dozens anyway. Yeah, I'll tell you.
Imagine that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to make that. A lot of fun.
Sounds like it. And which one of these books was your first?
Oh, this one, The Shadows of Power. And this one is about the power elite. I think we're getting some voiceover here in the background. Static noise over here. This book is The Shadows of Power. It's about the Council on Foreign Relations, which is a shadow government in operation since 1921 that dominates the cabinets of presidents, whether they're Republican or Democrat. In fact,
so Republicans and Democrats both agree that they'll hire people from the Council on Foreign Relations. What's the purpose of the CFR?
Well, Admiral Chester Ward, who was a member himself for 16 years, he was a former judge advocate of the U.S. Navy, said that the purpose of the Council on Foreign Relations is to submerge U.S. sovereignty into an all-powerful one-world government. And that's what these guys are into. These are the guys who shaped the League of Nations, who formed the United Nations, the World Bank, the IMF, and they also, NAFTA was their brainchild. And NAFTA, by the way, is a scheme to bring us into a North American Union with Canada and Mexico on the same pattern that the European Union was born out of the common market. We're told it's all about prosperity, and the NAFTA was to build a political union with the ultimate goal of a world government.
But NAFTA stands for North American Free Trade Association?
Free trade agreement.
Free trade agreement?
Yeah, well, those are just lofty words designed to, hey, has NAFTA helped us economically? We're getting flooded with cheap foreign imports. Our jobs are having an exodus overseas. It's destroying us economically. That we're not getting prosperous from NAFTA. And then they want a North American Union instruction on this. We'll have a common parliament.
But isn't it free trade, though? Is that free trade to have the Chinese imports?
You know what?
Why are they so cheap?
I am not a classic free trader. Now, this shocks a lot of conservatives. I got dissuaded from the free trade argument by reading a book years ago called Trade Wars Against America by the late William J. Gill, great conservative. He saw through the free trade argument. You know, the Council on Foreign Relations guys, the CFR, they back free trade all the way. And I asked some of my fellow conservatives, how come they want free trade, these guys who are against, and we want free trade? Somebody's getting fooled here. Karl Marx was in favor of free trade, and you know who was against free trade? George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Alexander Hamilton. They set up tariffs to protect our own industry. And when we tore these down through the GATT Treaty, NAFTA, and all these World Trade Organization, then we failed to protect our own industries, and then we've got these slave labor goods or socialist government subsidized goods coming in, and we can't compete against those cheap prices. So
isn't that really the key, that it's not free to the Chinese who are forced to work in a labor
Yeah, this is not true free trade. If you want free trade, it's got to be between free, equal countries, not with some slave labor company. Of course, the goods are going to be cheaper, and naturally they're going to undersell us, and they're going to knock out. Why don't we have a textile industry in America anymore, or a steel industry? It's being knocked out by these slave labor goods, or virtual slave labor goods coming in from overseas. And NAFTA and GATT were designed to do that, to weaken us to the point where we would just become like England. You know, England was once a mighty empire, and so was Spain. Now they're just little provinces in the European Union, increasingly so. Step by step, national sovereignty is becoming extinct in Europe, and that's what they want in America also.
And that was the goal of the CFR, Council on Foreign
From the very beginning. You know why they got started? When America rejected the Versailles Treaty, which created the League of Nations, they were shocked. And so they said, we've got to do something, we've got to change the political climate in America. So they formed the Council on Foreign Relations. It was incorporated in 1921, 2 years after the Paris Peace Conference, which established the League of Nations and the Senate's rejection thereof. And ever since then, they have been calling the shots behind the scenes in our government. You know, in America, we say, hey, all power belongs to the people. Hey, you know, that, in principle, that should be true. But the truth is, it's the big shots, the multinational corporations, the big banks that are really calling the shots in the Council on Foreign Relations, the major foundations, tax-free foundations, which use that tax-free status to push their agenda.
Well, the word power, you said that the power we think is supposed to be with the people, but your book title, The Shadows of Power, what does that mean?
Well, these are the guys who stand in the shadows. Shadows, of course, implies darkness, and darkness implies evil. And these are the guys who stand in the shadows, unelected people who get appointed into the government of an elected leader. But you know what? Even though we elect our president, they are picked in advance. The two major party candidates are picked in advance before we even get a chance to vote. I'll give you an example of that. Jimmy Carter was unknown to the American people. He got elected, nobody heard of him. 7 months before the Democratic nominating convention in 1976, 3% of the American people, 3% of Democrat registered voters favored Jimmy Carter for president, according to the Gallup poll. Nobody even heard of this guy. Then what happened? He gets to sit down at dinner with David Rockefeller, kingmaker of the establishment, and Zbigniew Brzezinski, who had formed what they call the Trilateral Commission, which is an attempt to unionize America with Asia and Europe. And he got the favor of the establishment, and so all of a sudden, his picture's on the cover of Newsweek, his picture's on the cover of Time. Wall Street Journal says he'd be the next best president for America. New York Times is puffing the guy, and all of a sudden...
I thought the Wall Street Journal was conservative.
Yeah, well, conservative, you can take it with a grain of salt. Unfortunately, our media in this country is controlled by an establishment that, yes, superficially, financially, they're conservative in the sense that, yeah, we want lower taxes on capital gains, big deal. But when it comes to issues like abortion or family issues, the Wall Street Journal is not going to be behind you. They may pay a little lip service to conservatism, but they're not truly conservative.
So we've got the right wing and the left wing of the left wing. Those were our two choices, right?
I like the way you put that. That's a pretty good way of putting it. Yeah, we're moving towards a socialist one-world state. It's unfortunate. We try to wake up people through this. You know, the John Birch Society has been fighting this for years, calling attention to these things, but there's other people as well.
Well, let's move on to your next book. What was the second book you wrote?
Oh, I wrote this book. It's called Tornado in a Junkyard.
That's a good name.
I mentioned I was a hippie, right? And I believed in all those socialist lies. One of the reasons I became an atheist, which then automatically leads you into becoming socialistically minded. I mean, Marx said religion's the opiate of the peoples. I was taught in public schools that we descended from apes and that the world started from this ancient ocean where the right molecules got together and formed our single-celled ancestors, and I was told that was scientific. Because, hey, science is supposed to be based on truth.
Well, isn't it called the theory of evolution?
Yeah, but it's accepted as a fact. If you say in public school you don't believe in evolution, there'll be a what a goofball, you know. You're born in a barn, everybody believes in evolution. All scientists accept it. Well, you know what? There are a lot of scientists who now reject the theory of evolution. There's some well-known ones like Michael Behe, who wrote Darwin's A Black Box, Lee Spetton, who wrote Not by Chance. These are distinguished scientists. What my book does is it takes a lot of this, the scientific language, it breaks it down to layman's terms, and shows you exactly why chance could not create something as complex as a cell. You know, in Darwin's day, he thought cells were simple. He thought it's a little simple lump of carbon, that's all a cell is. Pardon me for spitting on you.
Go right ahead.
Okay, like Jerry Lewis says sometimes. Okay. But hopefully I'll be taken a little more seriously than Jerry Lewis. But Darwin thought cells were simple. They're not. You look at the information in a cell, we now know it filled thousands and thousands of volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. It could not come about by chance. There's so many things wrong with the theory of evolution. The fossil record does not support it despite the claims of evolutionists. The missing gaps are still there. And how did a fish get to be a human being? They say it was by chance mutations. Well, guess what? Chance mutations, they delete information. They give you genetic birth defects. They do not create new organs, and they've never been seen to do so.
So randomly changing DNA doesn't improve anything?
No, it's not going to improve anything. Even with natural selection trying to act as a guiding force, it's not going to make it. Now, my other book, The Case Against Darwin, is just a mini version, because you know what? This thing is over 300 pages long, lots of footnotes, fine print. But This one is for the 1 hour. You can read it in like an hour and get the basics on what's wrong with Darwin's theory. It's very important because, you know, a lot of people, their view of themselves, their view of God, and their view of politics in the world stems from this theory. And hey, did we really come about by chance? If so, we can do whatever we want. Hey, you know, if the Bible's an old myth and we just evolved from fish, if the Bible's an old myth, then hey, the Ten Commandments are an old myth. I can do whatever I want. That's what happened to my generation, the baby boom generation.
So that's how evolution leads to atheism and leads to, which leads to socialism. Is there? Can you explain the title "Tornado in a Junkyard"? Not everyone knows the origin of it.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, actually, there was a British astronomer some years ago was asked what the chances were of higher life forms coming about by chance. As Darwin had said, they said the odds are the same as a tornado sweeping through a junkyard, leaving behind a perfectly assembled Boeing 747. I love that the imagery in that language, and so I chose that phrase, tornado in a junkyard, as the title of my book.
Well, it sounds like the common thread in all your books is correcting the error of socialism.
That has a lot to do with it, because a lot of people who endured socialism under Stalin and his successors in Russia and in Eastern Europe will tell you what a horrible system it is. But unfortunately, in our own country, we're still moving towards socialism. We see the government taking over healthcare. The government's taking over the auto industry. The government's telling churches what they can and cannot say. And you know, people may, well, I don't like God, so I like that. But you know what? The more you yield control to the government, the more you're going to lose your freedoms, and ultimately you're going to end up in a totalitarian state, just like the Soviet Union experience. We're moving there gradually through step-by-step socialism, but the end product of that is the same as a communist state.
Well, someone's going to have to pay the bills, and we may not be around to write that check, but our kids and grandkids.
Yes, it's our soaring national debt, which is in large part thanks to the Federal Reserve System, which these guys also created, and which you also talk about in The Shadows of Power.
Okay, well, thank you very much, James Perloff.
Oh, well, thank you, Colby. I'm sorry to do most of the talking, but I guess since I was the subject of the interview, that became my job. You're right. Thank you for a delightful interview. You really know how to ask the right questions and so forth.
Thank you very much. Well, join us next year at the annual Camp Constitution Barbecue and Book Sale in West Roxbury. Thank you very much.